Welcome to your Artsy Girl podcast. I am your host, Christina Carrere. This is a podcast about art, poetry, writing, and anything about creativity. Sit back, relax, and get your dose of brain food to get your creative juices flowing. Welcome to episode 30. This episode, I will be featuring a powerhouse poet couple. Yes, they're a married couple that have extensive publications and are very distinguished poets and writers, and that is Heather Davis and Jose Padua. Now, Heather Lynn Davis earned a BA in English from Hollins University and an MA in creative writing from Syracuse University. She attended the Bucknell Seminar for Younger Poets and is a winner of the Hayden Carruth Poetry Prize at Syracuse University, a Larry Neal Writers Award, Bethesda Literary Festival Essay and Poetry Prizes, and the Arlington County Moving Words Poetry Contest. She is the author of The Lost Tribe of Us, which won the 2007 Main Street Rag Poetry Book Award, and has published 2 short stories in the Rehoboth Beach Reads anthology series. A short story is also forthcoming in the anthology Us Against Alzheimer's, Stories of Family, Love, and Faith. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, the poet Jose Padua, and their son and daughter. She is at work on a novel. Next, of course, is Jose Padua. He was born in Washington, D.C. and is a veteran of New York's spoken word literary scene. His first book, A Short History of Monsters, was chosen by Billy Collins as the winner of the 2000 Miller-Williams Poetry Prize and is now out from the University of Arkansas Press. He writes the blog Shenandoah Breakdown. Please welcome my featured guests, Heather Davis and Jose Padua.
Hi, Heather and Jose. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christine. How are you?
Hi, Christina.
Thank you. Yes. How are you today?
Doing pretty well. It's like at least it's not 105 degrees today in DC. A little better.
I'm all right. I've been better.
How long have you lived in DC?
Well, me, I grew up here. I was born here in the late 50s, so I'm that old. And I've lived most of my life here, except I lived in New York City for a number of years. And then we came back to DC like end of last summer. And then we're living in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia for about 11 years, me and Heather and our kids. And now we're back in a different sort of environment.
Oh, okay. Well, I was stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, so I'm kind of familiar with the area.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have a girlfriend that's been living there. She's from there also. But yeah, I'm familiar with the area. I used to go to the go-go clubs with her. I don't know if you guys know go-go music.
Oh, you hear it just walking around the city. You can hear it. Yeah.
Heather, where were you born in? Where did you grow up?
I was actually born in Wilmington, Delaware, and I lived there for a while. And then I moved to Pennsylvania, and I grew up in Hershey, where they make the chocolate.
Oh, my goodness. That's
very dangerous. Yeah. Yeah, it's really, the air does smell like chocolate there a lot. And I grew up working at Hershey Park in the summers and things like that. And then I went to school in Virginia and Roanoke. I went to Hollins University, which is a great writing school. And then I went to Syracuse, and which was very cold. And then I moved to DC after grad school, and that's where I met Jose. I was in DC in the early 90s.
Oh, in the early 90s. Okay. So that was what I was going to ask you. How did you guys meet, though?
He was big, so he was being quite the poet on stage. I was like,
very debonair.
I was like, those poems are pretty good. Who is that guy? But we didn't meet that night. I just saw him, and then we actually met at this place called the Flying Saucer, which was a CD record store. Yeah. And we met there, and then we started hanging out in DC, and we went to all the readings and hung out, and
we were friends for a while.
We were friends for a while.
A couple.
Yeah. But once we started dating, that was pretty much it.
And yeah, we've been together ever since.
And so both of you are prolific poets. And I'm so honored that you guys are on the show. And Heather, I did read the poem you sent me. And it's funny, I had to chuckle because I guess the first line was something about, I guess you were talking about Jose winning his big ass prize.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Funny. And Jose, congratulations, by the way. That's
thank you.
Excellent, most excellent.
Yeah.
So let me ask Jose, how did you get into writing?
Well, ever since I was a kid, like in grade school, I was always interested in it, but I was, like the way stereotypes are, like other kids would think, oh, you should be into like science and stuff, and so that's what I followed early on. But then eventually, I just said, like, what I really want to do is write, and so I even got a scholarship to Caltech. But then I said, oh, I'm turning this down. I'm going to just go to college here in town and become an English major, and that's when I started, really writing a lot in college.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so I understand you're Filipino?
Yes.
Okay. But both parents Filipino?
Yeah. Like they both came here to the U.S. in the late 40s, early 50s to they went here separately to work at the Philippine embassy here in D.C., and then that's where they met. Okay.
So they also met in D.C.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
That's right.
There's a parallel,
Yeah.
And Heather, how did you come into poetry?
Well, I blame it all on my English teacher, Marilyn Durfee, who got me started. My dad was a writer and artist, so I mean, he still dabbles in all that, and so I think I always wanted to follow in his footsteps, but really, it was a middle school teacher who got me writing and really got me hooked. And then I was lucky enough that I was able to do a governor's school for the arts in Pennsylvania, which they had a great summer program. It was like a 5 or 6 week summer program for kids in high school, and I got into that, and that was like total paradise. To go somewhere and live on a campus with other kids who were artists at that, when you're 16, that's such a great experience. And that really cemented it. And then I just, all the way through college, that was my focus, was English, studying English and writing. And then I was able to go to grad school at Syracuse. And so, I feel like I've been doing it for a while.
So are any of you guys teachers or professors or anything, or taught creative writing?
Not me. I've never ventured to
just curious.
Go in front of the one time I went in front of a class, they just kind of looked at me like I was crazy and asked, like, they basically wanted to ask, what's wrong with you? But they were too polite to actually ask that question.
Oh, no.
We're not very, I mean, I a little bit in grad school and a little bit after that at a community college. And I've done a little bit of teaching privately, some poetry classes here and there, and I've run a couple of writing groups, but I'm a lot more social about that stuff. Jose's much more, he's much more like, let me do the work. And, he'll go out drinking and talk and hang out with writers that way. But
not that I don't love people in bars. It's just I love them more in bars than in classrooms.
I was just curious because, it's weird, it's interesting to hear the differences and how, there's poets that go to the teaching route, and then there's, that are, pretty much more like, no, I'm just going to go focus on my writing. So I was just curious which track you guys were,
Yeah, we're very much not in the academic track. I mean, I've thought about it, but honestly, I have a day job and I have to earn a certain amount of money. And it's like, I never just felt like I could venture out to do that. Yeah, survive in that world. It's just so difficult. It's really hard. And I kind of also like leaving my writing sort of out of the earning of the money. Like I earn my money during the day, but I'd like to have the freedom to do the writing separately.
Okay. Do you have a process or a routine for your writing? Do you set amount of time for it, or does it just come for you?
Oh, well, me, Well, usually depending on my mood, like if I have some paying work, I do a lot of freelance work, and I try to get that out of the way. But sometimes I'll just go ahead and dive in the morning, like start writing. If something is really moving me, I'll put off paying work until later. And when we were living in the Shenandoah Valley, I would stay up till like 3-4 in the mornings, a lot of nights just writing. And actually, when we were living out there, I got more writing done than I ever did when I was living even in New York. Even with all the inspiration that New York City had, I still got more writing done than ever in Front Royal, Virginia, of all places.
Interesting. How about you, Heather?
I feel like, Jose's very, very regular with his writing. Like, he's pretty much obsessed. So he writes every night. He writes every night pretty much late into the night. But I like to write in the early morning. So I try to get up sometimes like at 4 or 5 and write before I go to work. But, we have 2 kids also. And it's, it's spotty. It's like I actually wish I had a more steady habit. But for me, it comes in spurts and in little moments where I can fit it in. It's really hard. I think maybe when my kids are a little bit older, I'll be able to I'll be more regular that way. I'll be able to find more time. But it's a struggle. And I produce in these sort of short spurts here and there.
So what projects are you working on, Heather, right now?
Well, I'm just finishing up a second manuscript. I have the one book out from Main Street Rag, which is a great small press out of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to get a second manuscript out there, so I've been just starting to send it out. So I've got that, and then I'm also trying to work on essays, and I have a couple novels.
I'm working on one, but you have a couple?
Yeah. I finished one manuscript that's a young adult manuscript. So I'm still sort of, it's finished, but I keep revising it. And then I have another one I've started. So there's never any lack of ideas, Yeah. I just float between them as I feel like, especially, if I see a deadline for something that might motivate me, I'll be like, focus on an essay, for a few weeks. And then if I decide there's like a fiction deadline, then I'll focus on that. And sometimes it's true though. Sometimes if I just want to feel like I've accomplished something more complete, I'll write a poem because I can actually finish it. So that's always satisfying to to do that because it's so much easier. But I really love writing nonfiction too. And I'm trying to learn more about that. And I have a writing group I go to that has a lot of journalists in it, which has been really helpful.
And I've gone to a couple myself. However, I haven't found one that's a good fit for me. So you happen to find one that's pretty good?
Yeah, well, I've run them before. And so this one I'm in now has a couple people that I knew from when I had run. And really, the people, DC is amazing. Like, there's so many accomplished people here, but also, like, I guess I'm lucky because this group of women is, they're just really giving and encouraging and smart. And they just do the work. They do the work. They read your piece. They give you the good feedback. Then they tell you, what they think you could use. And it's, but they're all just really supportive. And so we just have fun together.
Good.
Yeah.
How about you, Jose? Do you belong to a writers group?
Well, actually, when I was in New York, I was part of this group that they called themselves the Unbearables. But at least, for my activities with them, I didn't really discuss writing. We would mostly just go hang out in bars and drink and play pool and things like that. And we would sometimes, just say that, I have a new poem or something. But we wouldn't actually read stuff to each other. We would just tend to hang out in bars, and that we were like barflies to a certain extent. After that, when I came to DC, And yeah, I've never taken workshops or anything like. I got into writing because I had maybe here and there tried to do films with people, and when you're working with other people, like someone always just would flake out or just decide they wanted to do something else. It would just never work out. So I decided, well, that's the thing I like about writing. I can do it by myself, and I don't need to worry about whatever someone else's energy level is. I could just keep going myself at my own pace and get stuff done. And so that's why.
So you're like more independent, and you feed off of other people's energy, kind of.
Oh yeah, I do like the other energy from people, and actually the only person I do show my work to is Heather. That's it.
And that's an interesting thing. Reading both of your poems, I have seen you guys mention each other. Oh, that was so sweet. Oh, yeah. Do you have any poems you'd like to share with us today?
Sure.
Oh, do you want?
Sure, I can read one. This is new, really new. So this will be the first time I'm reading it for anybody else.
Oh, good. Exclusive.
Give me some feedback. Okay. So this is new, and this is called Arrested. Last night, little boy, your dad dreamed he was being arrested. Maybe it was the handcuffs you couldn't wait to buy at the toy store. They were for your older sister, a solution to her many crimes. You put them to good use, figuring out quickly how to lose the keys. Without a second thought, you arrested your dad. Then you arrested me. Voice stern, face hard. I cuffed you too, wrists and ankles. Pretended to haul you off, let you escape. It was all so easy. Maybe your dad's dream arose from these games because our daytime lives are often a kind of dream. Or his dream could have come from the news of good people pulled from their lives, neighbors with long-time jobs deported, families split up. It could have been that. You are only second generation, boy with dark hair and island eyes, boy with a big attitude. They won't let you forget how brown you turn in the coastal sun. I say to your dad, maybe you should carry your birth certificate at all times, and I am only half joking. He can't carry a passport because he's never been outside this country. But would they believe him if they stopped him on a southern road, a western road, any road? Because on every road, he does not look like them. Last night, your dad dreamed he was being arrested, which means they've gotten into his head, but haven't won, not yet. Someday, you and your friends of many colors and countries, your wild, unafraid friends, all grown, will show us how to arrest such leaders and throw away the key. You will be the righteous generation, free from pettiness and greed, ready to make reparations. This is our dream, you rounding up the bad guys and shooting them to the moon, where the universe will allow them to play for hours on end, the pointless games that make them feel powerful.
That is powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that is the theme that you're working on this collection, or is that something that you keeps coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to write a mix of, I do write a lot about family and personal things, but I do always write about things happening in the world. And I feel like that's one of the things that motivates me. And I feel like we have to write about the things that are affecting people in the world, and that we have this love of language, and we should use it, and we should turn it into something that will communicate to other people about these things that we care about. So, yeah. So that's always in my work. Yeah.
Even me, I'm like, I better just keep my passport on me, Oh, it's scary, right? I mean,
it's so scary. It's just, and I just feel like, so many people haven't woken up to like where we're really at, which is just in a really, really dangerous place right now.
I know. Jose, do you have something for us too?
I picked the poem out. But I also write a lot of political poems. I go back and forth between the tragic and the ludicrous, and sometimes in the same poem, from comedy to tragedy. And this one is mostly on the light side. This is called A Song for Sunshine. This evening, when I got home from the store, I laid a bag down on the kitchen table and said to my wife and daughter, "Check this out." My wife opened the bag, pulled out what was inside, and said, "Oh, they're apples." And I smiled. "But they're not just any apples," I explained, and I paused so as to make my great surprise even greater. This is a technique I learned on the city streets. Pause if you want to surprise the shit out of anyone. Then I said it. "They're not just apples, they're jazz apples." And I pointed to the tiny purple sticker attached to the red and yellow surface of one of the apples. "See, it says jazz. Because they're not regular apples, they're jazz apples," I said, and I nodded the way I do when I'm driving home a point, and swept up my hand toward the ceiling the way I do when I'm blown away by the marvels of the world we live in. My wife looked at me, then my daughter looked at me, and my daughter asked, "Yes, but are they organic?" And I paused again, a technique I learned to use in school whenever I had an answer that I knew wasn't the right answer, then said, "No," and repeated again, because I am a poet who on occasion repeats a word, a phrase, a line for the beautiful music it creates. "They're not regular apples, they're jazz apples." Then my wife said, "We can't eat those apples. Apples are the worst for retaining pesticides." And without missing a beat, without taking the time to breathe, much less pause, a method I learned on my own, because as a poet, I'm the inventor of marvelous things people don't know need to be invented. I said, "The best jazz is always a little dangerous." And my point was driven home to my wife and daughter. And one day my son, who is still too young to understand, will indeed understand this, and what a great pleasure it is to live with me.
I try to hold back my chuckle because it's so cute. But are they organic?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I'm thinking is like, oh, are the dang apples organic?
Yeah, but they're jazz apples.
Oh yeah. So
those are the conversations that happen in families, though. For real.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, who were your earlier influences? When you started off writing, or even now. I mean, who are your influences that inspire you to write also?
Me, like, one it was some of the first poets that really got to me were like Frank O'Hara when I was like in high school, and then later, like what led to my more decadent days, I liked Charles Bukowski a lot. But then, I found more of a middle ground, and now I'm, back then I was like, almost an insane drinker. Now I'll have like maybe one beer a week, and now among the people I like are, well, like also some friends of mine are like Jeff McDaniel, Joel Diaz Porter, Brian Gilmore is another poet from DC who's just wonderful, and a lot of these people just really inspire me, and it's and even though I don't do workshops, it's always nice to hang out with these folks and get to hear what's going on in their heads, and just feel some of the energy that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but Martha Vineyard, the writing program there, I guess now they do fellowships for writers who have children, and you can bring your children.
Oh, we've been looking for that.
Check it out. Yes.
Oh. Yeah, we've been looking for something like that. It's hard to find. There aren't too many, but they said it's Martha's Vineyard?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to check it out.
Yes.
We've never been up that far.
I was pretty stoked too. I know. So that is the dilemma, right? When you're you're a writer or artist, and you have family and you have kids, and it's like you hear all these cool things that I wish I could go to, but because of limitations, I can't.
Though at the same time, like I do get so much inspiration from the things that like both of our kids say. It's just it helps me open up my mind.
The things they say and do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you have to make do with what you have. I mean, sometimes, I get frustrated because like I would love to be able to do more independently and go here and go to these, people go to these retreats and stuff. But in the end, you just like make from what you have, and you have to do it wherever you are. And certainly so many people, and especially women, I think, have been in that situation where they're limited, there's limitations on them, but they had to sit down and just do the work however they could. So.
Yes, I have been a single mom for many years, and writing and creating. I just find pockets here and there to, sit down and do work. But it's not like a daily, I can wake up every day and write. No, that's not my reality. But yeah, it's tough. And, you just gotta do what, like you said, deal with what you have. And also, kids don't stay young forever. You'll look up and it's like, oh my goodness, now what I do?
No.
So are your kids like really young?
Well, our daughter is 16 and our son is 8.
Okay.
So we did have our kids really late.
Yeah.
So.
I have a 16-year-old. She's my youngest though. Yeah, my youngest. My 2 older ones they're young adults now, like
oh wow.
27, 25. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I do the same thing.
And don't you have a book that just came out too?
Yes, thank you for asking. By Astrolabes and Constellations.
Oh, I love that title.
Yeah, my first full-length collection. I have a chapbook through Dancing Girl Press, The Art of Exporting, and most of my themes are about the Philippines. I grew up there, but I've been here in the States since '85, so it's been a long time. But I talk about the, migration and immigration and all that stuff about mixed identities, things like that. That is a part of me, and and I'm waiting for me to evolve from that theme into something, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if have you guys thought maybe you were kind of like focusing on something too much and try to break out of it?
That's a good question. I just noticed, like, when I was putting this second book together that, like, I was having a really hard time figuring out, like, what was holding it together, the themes. And then I finally had a breakthrough, and I have these sections that I like now, but then I realized how similar it is to my first book. And I was like, well, I mean, I sort of do a very similar thing in my first book, but like, I think that's fine. Like, I think you have the things you need to write about. And a lot of writers do obsess over one topic, and that becomes their specialty. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think you should write the thing that is still like, it's like an evolution. Like if you're still in that space where you have to write about a certain thing, I think that's fine. But, and then I'm not sure you can force it, force it into a new area, but I think you just have to, whatever is there that needs to come out,
Well, when we're living in the Shenandoah Valley, like my poetry evolved from being out there in this part of the country that's where, politically, we were at odds with the way most people thought there. It's a very much a red part of the state of Virginia, and lots of Confederate flags and things like that. And then, and so like. I don't know how we didn't notice that before we moved there, but we didn't. And so when we found that that's what we were living in, that pushed me to write more political work, and also just pushed me to just write even more than I had been before, because it just seemed even more important than put all this down and say what I had to say. on there and else in the country.
You were sort of forced to evolve.
I was in, before I came back to DC, I was hanging out on the Lower East Side with the Nuyorican poets at Lower East Side scene. Yeah, and then I came back to DC, and then after Heather and I got together, we seemed to move further and further out into the country, and that's how we ended out in the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah, change of settings and experiences. Yeah, definitely would influence. Because I did have some, like when I was out in Micronesia, I wrote some poems about that. Different experience definitely gives you another thing to explore and write about and dig deep. I'm just so stoked that you guys came on. And anything else that you want to share with us?
Well, just I want to say, recently, just last weekend, Jose did a reading for Raíces, the organization that helps immigrants, and it was really awesome. It was in DC, and it was 4 or 5 poets, and it was a really amazing reading. And there is some recordings of it. We could possibly share those, but also just I think coming up September, I think it's September 4th, all across the country, there are readings to benefit racists and raise awareness of the issue of supporting immigrants. So people should look out for that. I forget the actual name of the event, but I can share it with you later.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's happening in cities all over the country.
Oh, really? Really? Oh, yeah. So good. Well, like I said, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking to you and learning more about you guys' work. And it just amazes me to see poet couples and artist couples work so well together and support each other's work. I'm sure it's not always perfect. Life is not always perfect.
Definitely not.
The end result is you both are creating beautiful, beautiful work and sharing it with the world.
Thank you so much. Gosh, your show is awesome, and I'm looking forward to reading your book too.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, I wish you both the very best of luck, and do stay in touch, okay? Well, everyone, that is it for now. Please tune in next week for my next featured guest. In the meantime, have a productive and creative week. Bye, Heather and Jose.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.